Hey, everybody, real quick, before we get rolling with the show, you may recall that earlier this season, we offered 10 youth associations a 45-day free trial on the coaches site. All you had to do was register a minimum of 20 coaches, and we would provide a usage report at the end of the 45-day trial so you could evaluate how much value it was bringing to your association. It was super successful, so we figured let's do it again to close out the year. So we are looking for 10 youth associations. Again, all that's required is that you register a minimum of 20 coaches, but you could also register all your coaches. And again, there's no financial commitment. There's no catches. It's just free features, free content. You can take the coach site for a test drive, and we're pretty confident you're going to be really happy with it. So if this is of interest, hustle, shoot us an email at info@thecoachesite.com. Put 45-day free trial in the subject line, and one of our customer service reps will be in touch with you ASAP. And now, on to the show. You guys got 3 games in 2.5 days coming up. It's a Thursday. What does a Thursday practice look like given the weekend schedule?
You know what, with our Thursdays, what I like to do with Thursdays I don't want them to have to think. Like we have basically the same drills that we do every Thursday. It's a little quick rundown on different aspects of our game, different systems that we run. You know, our D zone, our neutral zone, couple offensive sets, but ultimately they're not. We don't even go to the board really. They know what the drills are. They're little short hit, 6-minute kind of quick hit drills, and then finish with a real good battle drill, right? The kind of is the final kind of competition that we do that is between our goaltender and our goaltender is trying to win the drill. So is the D and then the forward. So they're all kind of competing against each other. And it's a long-standing, battle drill to kind of finish the day off. But for me, it's just about getting those reps in and making sure that they don't have to think about the drills and just get that work in before the real fun starts on the weekend.
I know how organized you are. When you say you don't want the players to think, how much is the organization that you do, which I'm assuming starts in the off season, is in preparation or is with the intention of making sure that there's parts where the players don't have to think and they can just show up and
for me, I'm really big on not assuming people know how to do things the way we want them done. And so, everything is laid out here in a way that with our group texts, our group chats, are the first thing they show up in the morning. There's a TV screen that has the whole day laid out for them, knowing what is expected, of them for that day. When it comes to the practice itself, that TV screen changes about an hour before practice, and it shows all our drills so that they come up there. So again, as the year goes on, less and less time is spent at the board on the ice. We're just getting after it real high tempo, so that they're not sitting there trying to figure out drills. I mean, they're trying to execute drills.
Yeah. And, probably worth noting, you guys are on an 11-game heater right now. I know that you've seen this movie before, but I'd be curious, like when you show up on a Thursday, what's your demeanor and tone like to help the players just focus on the next game and not carry a 11-game winning streak?
Yeah, it's a good question. Probably if you ask my players over the years, whenever we've been in these kind of situations, I'm probably harder on them when we're doing well than when we're not. I think sometimes when you're not doing well and you're kind of having your ups and downs, sure, there's a time to give a little kick in the butt, but a lot of times you don't want to pile on them and make things worse, and you try to find different ways to solve the problems. When things are going well, I think I try to keep my thumb on them, and like you say, these aren't professional players. These are guys that are still, even at the pro level, it's hard to not get lost in the moment, sort of thing. And And so I think I've tried to make sure that we stay grounded and set and understand that things can switch in a hurry. And so, again, today, we know what's at stake. We've got, 26 games to go. And I think the beginning of the year, the goal was to make the playoffs. And now things are kind of shifting a little bit where, you're in first place in your division with 26 games to go. It's a lot of hockey left. But, I think if you set, you're in a position that can be kind of, one of your goals to try to hang on to that division.
What, like, if I had to ask you, I mean, you mentioned making the playoffs, which I think if you had said that in August, a lot of people would have kind of like rolled their eyes a little bit, like to make the playoffs as an expansion team. I mean, I think the only time certainly that I can recall in Major Junior at least would be the Everett Silvertips, who went on a run to the final back, and I think that was 2002. But if I had asked you back in August to say like, "Hey, Fred, this season's going to be successful," if like, is playoffs how you would have finished that?
Well, I mean, the truth, I guess if I'm going to come on a show like this and talk about it, I might as well be honest about it. Like the first thing I did when we got accepted into the Western Hockey League is I looked up what the best records were in the history of the CHL and have them on a little card that I look at every day.
Yeah.
And so there's a team in the Quebec League that had 37 wins. Obviously, Everett had 35 in the Western League, and those are the two records. And I think Erie had like 20 something, which we've already surpassed in the OHL. So, I mean, what do we got? 25 or 26 wins right now. So, I mean, we're in a, it's not about breaking records, but you kind of set different sights on different things, and and it's been well documented. I think that in our first team meeting, I put up the picture of the Memorial Cup and talked about how, when does the process start? Is it embarrassing to say that our process has started the minute we like the first time we walk in with a Western League logo on? That's when the process starts in my mind. It's not now. Do you finish that process 5-10 years from now? I don't know. Is it 8 months from now? But the bottom line is the process has started. So I had to explain to our players that that's the kind of mentality that we have around here. We're not just kind of going through the year because we're an expansion team with a certain way of doing things, and then we'll start getting more serious as we lose that moniker. Like, we have to act a certain way, that a championship style way right from day one. And maybe people think I didn't want that to come across like anything other than what it is that I think if you don't handle yourself in that kind of way on a daily basis, it's hard to all of a sudden turn it on it's at some point years down the line.
Yeah, no, listen, man, I agree with you. And I think having that vision for what the horizon looks like, and I think we see all kinds. Well, it's funny you say that because last night when I'm Googling you and the Penticton Vees, I've got the America's Team, like the Dallas Cowboys documentary.
Yeah.
And everybody forgets, like, they got their ass kicked. But like Jimmy Johnson says the exact same things. Like, from day one, they talked about winning a Super Bowl and how much they hated losing, but they still had to go through a lot of shit for 2 seasons till
absolutely
the fruits of their labor kind of came together. Really interesting. Your players when they're interviewed, and we'll get into it, but I thought it was unique that you brought players from the team that you had in the BCHL last year, and in some cases you had to negotiate to get rights of certain players to be on this year's team, which may not have seemed like the obvious strategy from a roster building perspective. But when they're interviewed, they're not talking about like X's, and when they're interviewed and talking about the success that you're having, they're not talking about X's and O's. There is a real obvious pride that they had in taking the culture and making sure that came with them. And obviously a really unique circumstance, but like, what are the things when those kids are getting up in the room? Like, what are the things that they maybe said early on in the season to say, hey, this is how we do things around here?
Yeah, it was critical to what we wanted to do here, and we learned. It was funny, like you kind of foreshadowing. A couple of years ago, we had won back-to-back championships with the Nadeau brothers and all the other guys. There was so many great players on those teams, and they left. That second year that we went back to back, we had 14 returning players, so everybody left. We had 2 returning players, and I remember the beginning of that year, kind of joking, saying, "God, this feels like running an expansion team. Like there's nobody left over," and we really struggled during training camp, exhibition season, because we realized like there was just too many cats to herd, so to speak, and it was all about like the cultural things that we do, just the little nuances, the things we do between periods, where the meetings are. Like it was like I like kind of back to what I said is don't ever assume that people know how you want things done, right? So it was like we had to do a better job of kind of explaining what it's like to be in a Penticton Vees. Well, now fast forward to here we are going to have an expansion team. And one of the things we talked about as a staff is how important it would be to have a nucleus of guys that we all thought could play in the Western League that played for us the year before in the BC Hockey League. And yes, there was a few guys that we were able to list that weren't on people's lists at the time. And, our Nolan Stevenson, our captain, we had to negotiate his rights out of Swift Current. There was a couple, Eli McCamey was too young, and there was no way that Victoria was going to allow that to happen. So, we just kind of walked away from that situation. And then the one that we were really disappointed we were digging into was the, Max Heisey. And to Prince Albert's credit, they're having a hell of a year. And obviously, they knew what they were doing by not giving him, they were making it very difficult for me to be able to acquire his rights. And so, but, Brydon Evers, he's been dealing with National Hockey League teams right now on potentially signing an NHL contract. You've got, Cal Stone on our back end that's done great. Louis Wayman. We drafted Tristan Peterson in the Euro draft that he had been with us the year before, played with Denmark in the World Juniors. And like I said, Stevenson. So like the 5 of them have been not only really strong on the ice, but they've done an outstanding job of explaining how we play here and what matters here. And I think you asked the question, like, so the first week we get through the exhibition season, we go on the road for our first weekend, and it was interesting because we play game number 1, and I've coached over 30 years. This is my 31st year, I think. Never have I coached a game where we've all coached games where you think you should have won, but you lose the game. But this one was weird. This one, I thought we should have won, but we lost 5-0. Not.
That was in Vancouver, wasn't it?
No, it was in Victoria.
Okay.
And so I'm thinking, holy shit, what the hell? Like, I thought we actually deserved to win, but not only did we not lose, 2-1 or 3-2, we lost 5-0. And so my captain says to me on the way over now we're going over to play Vancouver the next day. And he says, yeah, a few of the guys are like, well, this is the Western League. Like, we should be probably trying to win 8-7 or 7-7. I said, what the hell are they talking about? That's not how we're going to be. That is not how we're going to win hockey games.
Yeah.
And, he goes, well, don't worry, I've got it. He goes, we'll get their heads where they need to be. And then the next night we won 5-1 in Vancouver. And we kind of went up and down a little bit for the first month of the season. Had to get things kind of sorted out a little bit. And then obviously we've been on a real run since December now.
Well, I think so much of coaching is you're battling human nature, right?
Right.
And human nature would be you show up here and say, hey, this looks pretty cool city. There's a couple lakes, great barn. We're gonna have a great year no matter what where we land in the standings, and we'll probably start taking those of us that are around for a while will start taking it serious down the road. But at what point? Because the one that stands out to me, like when you look at the other teams that you're competing with right now, you only have one NHL draft pick on your roster, like one. And at what point did you observe that maybe that there was a sense of belief within your group? Like, is it a specific event, or does that just something that just sort of organically over time kind of
Yeah.
rise to the surface.
The event was when all the media people for every other team in this league started taking shots at how old we were. I've always noticed whenever whenever in the past in the BC league, whenever our opponents would start worrying more about why we were doing something instead of themselves, then I knew that we were doing something right.
Yeah.
And we had the same roster at the beginning of the year, and nobody was saying anything because they didn't have any problem setting up the expansion rules where we couldn't touch any 09s. The 08s that were, far and few between. Like, the only reason we got a kid like Sean Burrick is he was already committed to go to the USHL. So they left him exposed. Tri-Cities left him exposed. It wasn't because they didn't think he was a player. Most of the other 08s there was none of them really available. If I actually showed the public what we were left with young players, like most of them aren't even playing in the Western Hockey League. So we had to go a little different route with a little older roster, and nobody had a problem with it early in the year. And then as soon as we started winning, all of a sudden, the radio guy for this team would have to make his comments, and the radio guy for that team had to make his comments. And I said to our staff, well, we've got them. Obviously we're doing something right now, because now they're starting to try to poke holes in what we're doing. And so that's kind of when we're kind of using it as fuel with our team, and kind of think it's kind of funny, to be honest with you. And the landscape's different too. Like, people have to realize too, like, there's going to be a lot more, unfortunately, 1 or 2 year guys, and like kind of like what I had in the BC league. And it's just fact. Like, there's nothing we can do to stop it now. And, you got to make sure your players are have a good experience, and then maybe you keep them an extra year or whatever, but you just got to be prepared for that. And so I think some of the mindset will change over time, but that would be the number one thing for me, is when I started hearing all this rumbling about, the makeup of their team. Of course they're winning because they're old. Well, we've got one 7th round pick. We have this 20 out of 23 teams. We have the 22nd. We're 22nd in WHL players. Like, we had the least amount of players that played in the Western Hockey League. Only Wenatchee had, I think they had 6 players return, that were Western Hockey League players. We had 8. So, I think when I look at different, if you use, let's say, the college way of thinking, like Mankato over the years was always older, and that's how they went to the Frozen Four. Union won a national championship against Minnesota. So, like, we had to do it a little different, and not to say that we're going to always do it. Like, next year we'll have a bunch of 2010s on our team. But with our fan base too, we had to, we couldn't come out of this winning 5 games in the first year and expect our fans to say, oh, this was a great move going to the Western League.
Yeah, no kidding. And so if we were to rewind the tape, so you started hearing rumblings, maybe not quite this time last year, but probably into February. It's like, I think Penticton might be moving to the Western Hockey League. The move gets announced. Now, I was a scout on the Everett Silvertips expansion roster, and I can remember that year. Like, our GM was just focused on the expansion draft. Our head scout just focused on the expansion draft. All the scouts, like, there was nobody's coaching a team. And I remember watching that press conference. I'm like, they gotta go scout a whole new different group of players.
Yeah.
They still got to coach the team they've got, which at the time I think was, if you hadn't already, but you were on pace to capture the regular season title in the BCHL. Yeah. Obviously, a playoff run comes after that, and I'm sure that, with all the planning that you do, it's a different animal in terms of how you put your team together. Specifically, like, I think probably fair to say, when you would walk into a rink up until last year, you could look at the top couple of players, and you might not get them all, but at least you could talk to all of them and take a swing at them.
There's no question, and we could even be late coming in and have a chance of getting them, right. So, like, it's totally different. Yeah, it was when the rule changed with the college players being able to, or the CHL players being able to go to college. We knew that we were done getting the top players coming to Penticton, so we had to make a choice on what we were going to do. And it was, you've been around junior hockey as long as I have in this province. I mean, well before I got here, Penticton has had, the Paul Correas and the Brett Hulls and Duncan Keith and, Brendan Morrison. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So we were like, for us, me and Graham, our owner, Graham Fraser, like, if we couldn't go to the Western League, I think my days would have been done. Like we would have both been done here. Like there was just like we couldn't have stayed in the BC League, and with where that was going to be going. Like people always ask, like, why didn't you leave? Well, it was, my owner was awesome to me and everything else, but I also had, the ability to coach high level first round picks and whatever. I still had great players here. Well, I wasn't. That wouldn't have got me up in the morning if the way things were going. So we had to make a decision, and it wasn't as easy as just saying, hey, we want in. Like, so when you talk about that press conference, I didn't even know what my name was at that point, because it was like come December, January, February, we were not only trying to get in the Western League, our lease didn't work for the Western League, so we were trying to get a new lease with our city here. So there was days that we were probably playing the old game, like, hey, we're a little further ahead with the city, and we were telling the Western League that our lease was almost done, and then vice versa. And we were playing a kind of a juggling act back and forth to try to make sure that this thing could happen. But like, I was doing reports for the Western League. I'd be sitting at my desk on a home game doing my report, something that they would need. I'd get up, go do my 6 o'clock speech to my players, come back in, finish, go back out for the game. After the game, maybe do something. Like, it was nuts. And it was, honestly, like, me and Graham look back at it, like, it's probably something that should have taken 2 years. We did in kind of 4 months.
That's how long it normally takes.
Yeah. We did in 4 months, and it was, it was wild. So, and we're like, the expansion draft was done on a day of a game in the conference final,
So how did you deal with, like, there's a human side of this too, like, take the hockey aside. I mean, just the human side of, like, grinding through that. Like, how did you balance your days and try and make sure that, both sides of that fence are getting the best of you?
Well, and you know me well, and you're exactly right. I didn't want to let down the guys that were here playing last year. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't fair to them, and it was tough, right? Because some of the guys, when everything started leaking out, there was guys on the team from Ontario and stuff that knew, well, I'm not going to be able to be back here next year, and stuff like that. So there was a lot of challenges that we were dealing with, but I wanted to make sure that we didn't just we weren't about just to cash in that season and move on, sort of thing. And so it was hard. I guess it goes back to, you have a great staff. Like, I got awesome people that work here with me, and with Jason McKee and Matt Vandenberg and Matt Miller, and they've been with me for a few years. Matt Miller's been here a long time, and Jason a couple of years, and then guys like Steve Colley's been with us forever, and he's really still on with our staff. And then adding Adam Surgery as our director of scouting was, I think, one of the best moves we've ever made, because it's hard to find people that grind the way I like to grind. I'm going most hours of the day, and he's the same way, and has fit really into what we want to do here and how we do it. And he was obviously a huge resource when we were going through the process.
You mentioned Graham Fraser, your owner, and I've never met Graham, a triathlon guy, Ironman guy.
Ironman,
I mean, the program had success before he arrived on the scene, but there just seems to be from an outsider's perspective, like, the standards just kind of been raised maybe a little bit more. The message we hear, particularly talking to professional coaches on this show, is that it all starts at the top. Like, you can do everything right, if you don't have the right ownership and the right collaboration with them, it can be challenging. What has he brought to the table in terms of how all this has worked out?
Yeah, he just he solidifies everything here, because I never have to look over my shoulder here. Like he, him and his family have always been very supportive, especially when times have been rocky. Like if there's been tough times, he does again. He's been very supportive. Never really gets involved in the hockey side of things. Like just lets us kind of do our job. We've got a relationship now that I'll ask him, what he thinks or whatever, because I respect them. And but like you hear these horror stories of owners that are kind of, hanging over their coaches or GMs or whatever, and making decisions. And and he's always been the one like, hey, if I'm hiring people to do a job, I want them to do the job. And and I think that's why, it's just like playing for a coach, that I think everybody wants to work hard for Graham because the way he treats people. And it's been hard because, when the other thing is like now when you move to this league, like everything, the expectations, like there's just way more at stake now, right? Like the financial commitment, was through the roof compared to what it was before. And so, it's hard. Like probably the biggest change was, on our business staff, like, having people that are capable of running this kind of business, and, and so that we're kind of working through that process. And, but no, Graham's been, I've been with him for, 18 of the 19 years, right? He came in the second year, and he, we've got a real bond, I think, because we think the same way when it comes to the player experience and what we're trying to give to the fan experience. And he's been nothing but supportive of my career.
What did Duncan Keith tell your players in training camp?
He did a great, it shows, when you meet guys like Duncan, like I've got to know him my whole time. I've been here a long time now, but like back when he was playing, and you like I remember watching him as a player, like in junior and stuff too, and you wonder how does a player get to where he gets to as a Hall of Famer. And just obviously you got talent and skills, but the passion is something that puts those guys over the top. And when he came in and talked to our team, he was pretty emotional, to be honest with you, which caught me by a little bit off guard, and it was great because it really sank into our players. And he gave a few instances when, about playing with a chip on your shoulder, like that every guy on our team here either was traded or left exposed in an expansion draft. Kind of, you weren't wanted, so to speak, and he told some stories about when he was going through his career about, he was told, he was too small to ever make, you're never going to play in the National Hockey League, and a few of these different stories, and talked about how he played with that chip on his shoulder. And I think it's served us real well this year. Excuse me. But yeah, it was a passionate speech and something that our guys talk about.
I bet. And so when you're evaluating players through that expansion draft process, like what sort of tells are you looking for to say, hey, this player might be able to show up here and have a chip on their shoulder and is going to, fit in and really embrace this type of an opportunity?
Yeah, everything for me was we knew we were gonna, if we were gonna be a little underskilled, and I'm not, and I don't say that as a downgrade to the players we have here. We've got enough skill here. But it compete level was going to be at the forefront. Like we were going to have to play a certain way. We were going to have to. We can't afford to take moments off. We have to be relentless in our approach. And so for us, it was okay. When we were looking to list players or anybody, if we were going to take a player, that was kind of the mindset. Does this kid, have that ability to play, compete at an extremely high level, even if it means that maybe the skill level is maybe not exactly the same spot as what. But like I said earlier, like the expansion rules were very interesting in the fact that you got a 50-man list, but you take the 09s off it, and you take the 20-year-olds off it, like the guys that were already leaving, and then and then they can protect basically 17 players. Like you start going through it, there's not much left, right? So, but for that back to, the thing is the players that we ended up with, however we ended up with them, via trade or through expansion, they've all bought into how we have to play now. Like from the first few weeks of the season till now, there's been a complete transformation of knowing that how we have to play structurally and how we have to play, energy wise. They've all bought in.
And, I can only imagine, maybe in a good way, like what a challenge this has been for you and your staff, given the circumstances that you would have been in the BCHL, where again, you had a lot of talent, and not that you don't have talent now, but just from a structural standpoint, like what are some of the adjustments that you recognize and said, hey, we're going to have to do this differently in this environment?
That's a good question. We're running basically the same systems. The one thing we can do is we can skate. Like we can skate. So like, like we can get to our spots where we need to be. And I don't know. Like I don't think we've really changed and said we've had to dummy it down or anything like that. Like as far as our system wise, and I think, we're scoring enough goals too. Like, so like, again, I don't want to make it sound like we don't have any skill, because we do, but we do it through a lot of our offensive play. It's just through grinding teams down and our forecheck. Like we know we're on our game when our forecheck's going. Like when our forecheck's going, then the opposition's going to have a hard night. And that's the big thing for us, where maybe there was years in the BC League that maybe we had teams that maybe made plays off the rush a little more, but
sure,
every level you move up, right? Like that's those opportunities are less and less.
You guys are third in the league in goals against. What are maybe some of the tenets or habits that you really stress defensively?
We try to play really connected in the neutral zone. We try not to get extended out where we're giving up a lot of odd man rushes. I think that's been the biggest thing. Getting guys to buy into that, in that system. I think we're willing to defend. All our D, are willing to defend along with our forwards. I think the one thing we've done a really good job this year is blocking shots. I think it's one thing that we've done a lot better than we have in the past. Our guys are committed to blocking, make it hard to get to our goal, pucks to our goal. And then we've been pretty disciplined again. Like my teams have always in the past, sometimes it gets called soft or whatever, but we just don't take too many bad penalties. But I think we play physical and hard, but we just don't take a lot of bad penalties. And so, we try to limit our opposition opportunities on the power play. So, I think it all kind of ties together when it comes to the defensive side. And again, I'll go back to even in the offensive zone as far as the defense, helping with your defense is when our offense, when we're hunting pucks in the offensive zone and sort of smothering and getting back over top of pucks, it's hard for those teams to come out clean through the neutral zone to get to our end zone, right? So it all kind of ties together on the defensive side of the game.
How do you define willing to defend to your players?
Yeah, it's just, it's not always the fun part, right? Like, I mean, we work on it almost daily, like some sort of drill that, starting in your own end. And I always talk about the quicker you can get out of your end zone, then you can go play in the fun end of the rink, right? So it's so for me, it's just guys that are willing to block the shot, like I said earlier, or like when you're grinding below the circles that and you're tired, that you're not just going to bail out on it and hope for somebody else to take over, and it's always the harder part of the game is being able to defend below the circles. And I think our guys, for the most part, have been willing to do that night in and night out.
I think one thing that's become pretty consistent in your teams is that, while there's been lots of skill, you haven't won a lot of scoring titles, and when you look at this, I don't want to say scoring by committee because I don't know if that's exactly it, but it just seems balanced. Like that's the word I would use when I look at your teams and you just look at the scoring chart. Like it's just really balanced. Like how do you think about just putting lines together and maybe how you put the different pieces together so every line or D pairing can contribute on both ends of the ice?
Yeah, when we're going, I like to have four lines that we could basically play against anybody, and they're interchangeable. And you're right. Over the years, we were always kind of thought of as this high octane type team, and sure, there was years where you have the Nadeaus scoring 100 points or whatever, but there was other years. I think one year, our 2015 championship, our leading scorer had 47 points.
Yeah,
and you can go through it. There was a lot of different years that we won different ways, but I like to come at you and like going back to the forecheck type game. To be able to forecheck that hard, you need four lines. Pretty hard to play two and a half, three lines. Energy wise, if you want to play the right way, and obviously this league you got the extra TV timeout than they did in the BC league, which helps. But at the same time, I just think the more you can kind of outchange teams and roll different, four sets of lines at different teams, I think it helps you play with a little more energy.
What is that? When you guys are as a staff on the bench, you mentioning like out changing teams.
Mm-hmm.
How do you? And again, I not to, I guess, give up any secrets, but once the game starts, what's your communication sound like? Or I guess maybe better way to put it, like, what are you looking for to say, hey, here's how we can maybe take advantage of the bit of the chess match.
Yeah. So they, obviously we have one assistant to watch how their rotations are going. And, for us, so in the past, probably we maybe had a little, probably a deeper lineup so that we could take advantage. I don't think we've had a lot of those opportunities. Probably this year has been more about maybe keeping certain lines away from our opposition's top lines, maybe, or something like that. But again, you get a different hunch on how you want, for us, like a lot of our matchups are more about our D, our defensemen, maybe not as much our forwards against their forwards, but more the defensive matchup is kind of the way we build. But, and again, it changes game to game or depending on the situation.
I think sometimes this concept of player development in today's game, especially because kids at younger and younger ages are being just like, kind of recruited to these super teams. And there's this sense that like, development's just putting a group of really good players together and you're done and they develop. How do you look at just over the course of your career, like, how do you influence or try and influence development in season, in practice, in the gym, et cetera? Like what are some of the key things that have kind of become the DNA of your program?
Yeah, things have changed dramatically from when I've been here 19 years now. So it's like, now we've got a full-time skating coach, does our skill development stuff on Mondays and Tuesdays, but we do a lot of power skating on Mondays. We got a strength coach that's in here, all week long where he does workouts with the guys, but also works on their stretching and dynamic stretching and stuff just for injury prevention. Like we've got two ladies that come in and do massages and stretching with the guys too. Like there's all these different pieces of the puzzle, so to speak. We do vision training, which is something that where we've got these boards that light up and different targets that they got to touch and stuff as far as works on their vision, hand-eye coordination. So there's all these different aspects that we've sort of layered into our program over the last handful of years, that when you put them all together, we think gives a lot of strength to our players and believing that they're doing more than everybody else. And that's half the battle sometimes, right? Like, sure, you're getting all these extra reps. We have, ice time in the morning and all this stuff, like but you're getting all these different reps, but then also just the belief that you're doing more than everybody else obviously gives you a leg up on game night as well.
I'm curious, like you mentioned a skating coach, and skills coach coming in on Mondays and Tuesdays. Like, that's time you could be working on the power play or, sort of those big picture things. Like, how have you learned to get comfortable that, hey, like, well, because coaches, there's always stuff you want to work on more. How have you gotten comfortable saying, hey, I know that if we focus on these individual skills, like just skating and doing edge work, this is going to pay off down the line?
Yeah, we get enough practice in. Again, if we have a bunch of weekday games, then we wouldn't do it that week. But the skill stuff is in the mornings before practice anyway, so that doesn't take anything. So, but the Monday stuff is if we don't have a weekday game, we'll do strictly just skating on that Monday because you still got Tuesday to Thursday to get all your system stuff in anyway, right? So, and skating, as we all know, is such a huge component of the game now. Like, so it's just, again, our guys are seeing improvements as the year goes on. That's only going to help us, in all aspects of the game, defensively, offensively, it doesn't matter what it is. If you can't move, you can't play.
Yeah. Scott Niedermeyer, Joe Nieuwendyk, Mike Richter, Jim Nill, Ron Hextall. I'm missing a lot of names. These are all former NHLers, in some case Hall of Famers who have sent their kids to come play in Penticton. I would only imagine that there's conversations that happen where maybe you're getting feedback on how you're doing things, or perhaps you get the opportunity to talk to these players about, whether they're putting on their dad hat or just saying their former player hat to say, hey, this is what I liked as a player. This is what I'd like to see for my kid. What have you learned from that experience?
Yeah, it's actually a crazy list. The Montes and cylinders and weight, and you can go on and on. Like it's a crazy. I think the best thing is that they just kept sending more and more because they were all talking to each other. It says that they obviously enjoyed the experience and trusted the program. They were always the easy parents, to be honest with you, because they had already lived it themselves and weren't living through their kids, so to speak, right? As far as
sure,
maybe getting overly involved. But who was really good? Doug Waite was really good. Like, not that any of the other guys, like if I ever went, but I remember having some really good conversations with Doug. And I remember him sending me an email talking about like when things aren't going well, sometimes these are the things that are missing. And I still have that email. And anyway, it was some good small little points. And here's a guy that has coached in the National Hockey League and never mind played in it, obviously, but yeah, it was something that stuck with me. But the NHL families that we've had here, they've been very supportive, and it's been neat, obviously being having them associated with our program. And a couple years ago when we had, you had, like you said, Richter, Niedermeyer, and Nieuwendyk all on the team, and the three of them were on the ice with their kids when we won the championship. And you look at those, are like 6 Stanley Cups between them, and they're out there celebrating a championship with their boys.
That's awesome. You touched on it. 19 seasons in Penticton. I think it's it's the thing that's not said in the coaching profession, but I think when a lot of people get on it, it's just assumed that you just try and climb as high and as fast as you can, and that's the gig, right?
Yeah.
How have you, and I know there's been other opportunities presented to you, like how have you evaluated maybe that opportunity to take on a new challenge at a different level or higher level versus saying, hey, like I'm going to build on this thing that is pretty damn good right now and see how I can make that better?
Yeah, it was probably early on, is when I, there was always opportunities, and then for whatever reason, just didn't feel like it was the right time family wise. And there was always you got to take a chance. And I probably didn't want to at the time because I always thought like I had a very unique situation here, which there was no junior A jobs like what I had. There really wasn't. And so Graham took to be quite frank, he took the finances out of it and said, like, you're not leaving because of money, you're going to leave because you want to do something else. So that helped. Um, but then as time went on, it became more of a legacy thing, like you said. Like, it became different in the fact that I was like, you know what, live in a beautiful spot, got a pro rink, we're still getting all the top, have an opportunity to coach top players and give them an opportunity to get to highest level. Watch what you wish for when you see these guys running around. And not that I'm saying that I wouldn't want to do that now or anything like that, but it's just at the time, now my kids are getting older. I had run around a lot in my first few years of coaching, and I was kind of, in a good spot and set. And that, I think there was something to be said about that. And when, you, again, if it was that we weren't getting those top players or whatever like that, then it probably would have been a little different for me. But and working with Graham has been great. So, who knows what the future will hold now? But at the time, that was kind of, for me, it was just like, watch what you wish for. You can run off a dozen different things, but you got to be pretty happy with what you have right here.
Well, part of the reason I bring that up is just I get a lot of calls from younger coaches, and they're always, it's trying to play like 3D chess and try and map out the next few steps in their career, right? But the coaches who I seem to be like the most in the moment and seem to, squeeze the most joy out of the gig are those that have generally been in one place for a while. They're comfortable. They know they can lose a few games, and they have the opportunity to get their team back on track. And I think, as you noted, it's about legacy. Like, there's this sense of like, I'm building something that I'm going to leave behind that's gonna be bigger than the sum of its parts, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been a fun ride. It's crazy, like, to think that next year will be 20 years. Like, it's in a flash sort of thing, and all of a sudden it's like, we go from the old Memorial Arena to this arena, and I would have never dreamt in my that we'd be at some point in the Western Hockey League, and I'm glad that I stuck it out and was able to be part of it.
When things get hard, who do you pick up the phone and call?
I talk to guys that that I've worked with in the past, but probably it's funny, like, just so everybody knows that our whole staff, after every game, we got to call my dad. My dad watches every game. He's 78 years old, and the guys, it's they're in Alberta, so it's an hour different, and so it doesn't matter if it's like quarter to midnight. Like, it's the first ring, boom, picking it up, and he's telling me about what happened in the game, and so the guys always get a kick out. The staff always gets a kick out of that. So
who's harder on the team, you or your pops?
Oh, my dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
What like, when as you get down, as you mentioned, you said 25, 26 games remaining this time of the year, what are some of the details that you look at and say, like, we're not going to be able to maybe improve in every area, but going into playoffs, these are some of the key areas that we want to make sure we're really tight on?
Yeah, it's just, just kind of, you just got to refine. Like, we're playing so many games, just refine what we've already been doing. We're not going to reinvent the wheel now. I think our roles have been kind of established. The players kind of know, what roles they're in. They know how we want to play. I mean, I usually know that you've got them where you want them when you hear them, like, going out for the second or third period, and they're regurgitating some of the catchphrases that we use, right? And I'm hearing that around the room now, and some of the little things like that, and that tells you that they've been listening and are on point. So that, I like where we're at right now. Obviously, it goes without saying. Obviously, we're on a winning streak, but I think the bigger thing is I think the guys know that we can react if things start to slide in a different direction here. Like, we'll be able to bounce back. I think we're strong enough now. We have enough confidence in ourselves as a group that if we lose a few in a row here, we'll be able to pull our back together.
Who are some of the players on your roster that might not be household names right now, but if there's a coach or scout from a higher level listening to this that they should be paying attention to?
Oh, I think I mean, I think it's not that he's unknown, but like I think Evers was an unknown. The people didn't really think much, really know who he was, riding Evers, and now all of a sudden he's, in my estimation, one of the best two-way centers in the entire league now. And but we've got some good, like a kid like Cal Stone is a guy that's kind of underrated on our team. He just competes extremely hard. He's an undersized defenseman. He kind of reminds me at times of how Stetcher was kind of undervalued so many different times, and but he brings his best effort every night, and and I think a guy like we have an 09 on our team, Boomer DeMars, I think is going to be a kid that's going to be really good for us over time here, and I think there's a handful of kids that I think one of the biggest acquisitions was getting Ethan McCallum from Saskatoon to give us one of the stronger goalie tandems with AJ Raltz and Ethan McCallum. So our goaltending's been real solid. So yeah, no, I think we're kind of we're maybe not overly sexy in one area, but when you put it all together, I think we're a team that can create a lot of problems for somebody come the end of the year.
What, given the new challenge this year of being an expansion team, was there any sort of inspiration that you sought out, whether it was looking maybe historically, like other teams, maybe reaching out, talking to folks, like where did you maybe find some sounding boards to help you prepare for all this?
Yeah, I talked to different agents and stuff that I'm close with, and just try to get an understanding. And a lot of the hockey people were telling me though, like, don't get your sights too high, because you're probably going to be 3 or 4 years before you make the playoffs. And so I respect, it was probably the right thing for them to say, to be honest with you. So it's just, I think if we can keep moving down, doing what we're doing over down the stretch here, to be something that we'll be proud of down the road. As far as the motivation, like I told you, we looked at what the top programs have done when the expansion programs over history, and we wanted to try to rival that.
This isn't an expansion team example per se, but did you watch college football?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
I love college football, and
Yeah.
So Kirk Cignetti, coach of Indiana, like he
Yep.
comes. It's going to be a Disney movie at some point, like
Right.
what's happened there. But for anybody that doesn't watch college football, so Kirk Cignetti comes from James Madison, like a lower level Division I school, shows up in Indiana, like the worst team in Division I football ever, like worst winning
Forever,
percentage
yep.
ever, and shows up on he's getting pressed in his opening press conference, and he tells the reporter, he's like, hey, I win, Google me.
I
And
saw
then
that.
right after that, he goes to the basketball game and he goes in front of all the student section and he says, like, we're not laying down for anybody. He's like, Purdue sucks. So does Michigan. How much does, just, I think sometimes and I don't know if it's a hockey thing per se, but I think sometimes we're almost just, there's so much humility. Like people are afraid of saying that could be interpreted as being, brash. But what's the power in saying, hey guys, you know what? We're actually going to look at the Memorial Cup on day one at training camp, and we're actually going to we're going to say the quiet things out loud and say that, hey, like we have high expectations here, and we're not worried about saying something today that might come around to bite us in the ass and playing
No,
back.
exactly, and that's what I try to explain to our guys, and I find that people that don't want to say it out loud, or they don't want to say it out loud, because if they fall short, then then it's then everybody knows they failed. Well, I mean, for me, I'd rather jump into the deep end of the pool with and get after it, right, than to sort of sit in the sidelines and kind of be quiet about things. And again, it's not an arrogance at all. That's not what it is. It's about defining a process and giving, trying to get that vision across to your players, and it gives them something to strive for on a daily basis. And I believe it works. I think it's something that our guys are buying into. They care about it. You can tell that they don't like losing. They want to prove people wrong, so to speak, and that we can, doesn't matter what year we're in, that we can win. And we're in a great league and a great conference. It's going to be real difficult, just the first goal was to try to make the playoffs. It's becoming more evident that that's probably going to happen. And then the next one will be to try to win a playoff series. And then you just kind of go from there.
Well, the other thing that's great, we'll finish on this. The other thing that's great is the community that you're in. And so I think, a lot of people know about Penticton. I'm sure there's a lot of people in the hockey world that, based on the season you're having this year, are getting exposed to not just the community, but the culture. And one of the cool things I got to do a couple years ago was when you did it, you brought back our 2008 team to come drop the puck. And of course, when you're coaching, you're grinding in the office, you're watching tape, like you don't really experience the community on a game day.
Right.
And one of my highlights was getting that experience with my little guy, my son, and walking around and feeling the buzz leading up to puck drop. And I don't know if that exists everywhere, but I know it exists there. For anybody that's listening that doesn't know about Penticton, what would you say about just the overall hockey culture in that community?
Yeah, you know what? Penticton's got a deep culture that goes back into the 50s, and the junior team started in 61. But, we even still have the goaltender, Ivan McClellan, who's 95 years old, that still comes to the games, that shut out the Russians in 1955 World Championship. So it's part of, they always talk about the, part of the fabric of the community. The Vees are definitely that here in this town. You go to the grocery store, you go down the street, everybody's talking about the team. This year, you could tell there was a little bit of tension maybe early in the year because the fans weren't sure how this was going to go, and you can see there's some relief on their faces now that we're doing well, and they're just excited about this. Obviously us going to the Western League, this new part of the legacy, so to speak, generations and generations of these fans that have come through this city, and it's fun being part of it.
I bet, man. Well, hey, it's been really fun to follow along. Again, can't thank you enough. I know that you're a little banged up and taking time to join us and share a bit of the story. It's an exciting time up there, and best of luck the rest of the way.
All right. Thanks for having me.